Take me to the place in the middle of the sun. And we'll sing this song, sing it one by one.
What's going on, guys?
Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you for tuning in. We got a great show for you guys today.
Yes, we interviewed Josh Gressel, and he is a clinical psychologist and couples counselor in a private practice, I think in San Francisco, and he's been doing it for over 32 years, and he's also been married for 38 years. So we got a pretty cool perspective as being a therapist, and then also having the real life knowledge of a lasting, committed relationship.
Long-term relationship. Yeah. And that's what we're going to be talking about today is
Yes.
how to prevent the fatigue of a long-term relationship. And we get into the details of some thought exercises you can do and really about changing your perspective, because we think that a lot of times we have unrealistic expectations based on how we grow up, movies, culture, and we talk about it in the show. And Sarah and I have said this before, we say it in the show, but we struggle in our relationship. That's why we started this podcast, is to get relationship advice and apply it to our relationship, which sometimes we don't do. And sometimes we do.
A lot of the time we don't do it.
Yeah. And,
we need to do it more.
and we can always do it more. And when we're doing it, things are usually pretty good because
the work pays off.
Yes, but it takes work. So get to work, and it's worth it. And that's why you're here. You wouldn't be here in the first place if you weren't trying to improve yourself, improve your relationship. So we commend you. Good job for being here. Thank you for tuning in, for subscribing to the show, for leaving us a review and telling your friends and family. We really appreciate it.
And if you haven't checked out our website yet, idopodcast.com, please go on over there. We have a lot of free resources, free guides to download. We have a 14-day happy couple challenge that's free. So yeah, check it out. And thank you so much. We hope you enjoy the show. Today's show is brought to you by our online course, Spark My Relationship. Create more passion, improve your communication, and build a stronger, more intimate connection with your partner in less than 90 days. We've collaborated with 15 therapists and psychologists to bring you the strategies marriage therapists teach their clients. To unlock a special offer only for I Do Podcast listeners, visit sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. That's sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. Hi, Josh. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I'm happy to be here.
Today, we're going to talk about how we can fight off the fatigue of long-term relationships. And in an article you wrote, you set the scene by describing a couple you saw in the airport, and maybe you can start there. I thought that was so great, and then we can dive in.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably a pretty familiar scene for all of us that we've seen couples like this. It's to some extent, it might even be considered a norm. I was picking somebody up from the airport at San Francisco airport, and ahead of me was a couple probably in their 60s, I guess. And he was walking a good 20 feet in front of her, just kind of in his own little world. And she was walking from behind him, kind of carping at him, saying to him, I don't remember the specifics, but it was something along the lines of, you're not dragging the suitcase the way you're supposed to be. And he was ignoring her. And I just thought, in some ways, doesn't that sum up what we think of in long-term marriage? I mean, doesn't that kind of really capture all that is we consider to be wrong with long-term marriage?
And we're going to talk about ways to prevent that, or mindsets to take so we're not that couple in the airport. But you also wrote, it's like how fast we kind of get used to that new car or the new pair of shoes we bought. Like when we first get it, it's exciting and or a new relationship, of course. But it's just interesting that that's such a part of our psychology, that we're so trained to be excited, and we got literally chemicals flowing through our body that are giving us endorphins and making us feel good, but that will fade. And so we need to have the tools to know that that's okay, and then to keep the right mindset of not, I need to trade this car in because now it's not new anymore.
Exactly, Chase. And I think what you're hinting at, or what I'm trying to say too, is it's really a question of our expectation and how much do we accept. Like, your car is no longer new. Does that mean you have to trade in your car every single year? I mean, is that what it takes for us to keep those, I don't know whether it's endorphins or oxytocin or whatever it is, for us to feel excited in life, do we have to constantly change things? And what's lost if we do that? And what can we gain if we don't? And we learn to be more accepting of the reality that life isn't always so exciting and people aren't always so scintillating. I mean, I think that a lot of what happens is our notion for example, for marriage is predicated on youth. It's predicated on the values of youth, which is newness and freshness and hotness and sexiness and all of those things. But it's just not possible for that to continue. And what happens when we have that unconscious or conscious expectation that we're supposed to feel like we used to, or like we see on the big screen, and the reality of our marriage isn't that anymore?
How do we change that mindset? Because like Chase mentioned, and you mentioned, like, do we change in our car every year, or do we get a new iPhone every time a new one comes out? And the answer is, with society right now, is yeah, most people do. And obviously that carries over into relationships. So what would you suggest in terms of maybe switching that mindset so that's not the first thing you want to do when things get hard or tough?
Well, I think a conversation like this is a starting point. One of the things I ask somewhat provocatively is, why are we flattered when somebody says, well, you look younger than your age? Why is that a compliment? If you really stop and try to unpack that, why should that be a compliment?
I feel like we overvalue youth, like you're saying, in our culture.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think we're all, I'm not, like I told you before we got on the air, I'm not pretending that I'm an expert in this and that I don't struggle with it too. I'm happily married for 38 years, but I struggle with the very same things that I'm depicting here. They come from a personal place, not just a professional place. It's really, really hard not to, now, for example, as I'm aging and I'm a gym rat, it's really, really hard for me that I can't really do the things I once did 25 years ago. Why? Why is that hard? I'm asking myself as well as you.
Well, I was going to say, what are some of the things that you try to tell yourself in that situation?
Yeah, well, I think I want to believe that every stage in life has got its own meaning, and that our job is to try to learn the lessons from the stage of life we're in, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. So if I have to come to terms with the fact, for example, if I'm using the gym example, that I can no longer keep up with people 30 years my junior, what's the lesson there? What's the beauty of me having to grapple with that? 30 years ago, I had to grapple with establishing myself professionally. And that had its own challenges. But this right now that I've got all the other things in order, this is what I've got to grapple with. And I'm not quite sure, because I think I'm in the middle of this, but I'm not sure I have a full answer to that. But I think it's got something to do with letting go, that we can't hold on to things beyond their time. And there was something else that was just on the tip of my tongue and ran out. I guess maybe there's something even in that, the fact that my mind doesn't work quite as sharply as it once did. I guess it's accepting the humanity of who we really are, and no longer holding on to the external how do we appear? What does our package look like to others? It's really kind of letting go of that and just being more vulnerable and more human in the world.
I think that's a huge task, but an important one. And that this ties into long-term relationships or short-term relationships is this theme of what we see in the world and our expectations. And you hinted at it, but culture and culture valuing youth, movies portraying the romance and everything ends up happily ever after. And it's not real life. And that sounds like, it's like, yeah, duh. But I feel like it's pervasive, like in Western society, that from every angle and from a young age, we're told a certain story. And the story that we're told in the US is that you're going to find your soulmate and you're going to be married and live happily ever after. That's the short version. And that's just not real. But even though I know that, it has shaped who I have become or who I was when Sarah and I met. And I'm still learning that 10 years into our relationship. I didn't go into when Sarah and I got together like she's the one and we're going to live happily ever after. But it kind of slowly went towards that. And then I had real questions of why isn't this the way that I thought it should be, and it's just, I think if you can, the first step being just realize that you are a product of this culture that's telling you these things, and to try to step outside of that and then, like you said, enjoy or get the lessons from the moment that you're in, whether it's aging or being in a long-term relationship, of this is hard. And hopefully just me sharing this story, you sharing this story, I think there's a lot of value in that because we're kind of debunking it. Sarah and I try to say all the time, we have a relationship podcast. Our relationship is rocky. It's good on the aggregate. We're happy, but there are ups and downs. There's times when we're very upset with each other. There's times that feel very dark, and anyone that says otherwise, or if you see that in a movie or a TV show, it's not real life. So, I just went on a bit there, but I think it's so important because I've realized how much it's affected my happiness because I have expectations that are not real, that are not based in real life.
Right. And let's then even throw in the social media, which fortunately I'm not on. But that kind of presentational life that everybody seems to be doing. Look how happy, how beautiful, how perfect our lives are. It's pernicious, the whole thing.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And you're not missing anything because, and that is another area of my life that I realize I'm way happier when I'm offline, when I'm not on social media, because I think it's in our DNA. When you see someone else is you judge and you compare. And so people on social media, that is also not real life. And so look how happy they are. They met so-and-so. And I'm not saying that there's not happy people out there for sure. They're just not happy 100% of the time, which is what you're seeing on social media. So I don't want to harp on that too much because it's oh yeah, we know, but it is super important to have that realization and maybe take a digital detox. And I guarantee you're going to feel better.
Mm-hmm. Well, to bring us back then to the long-term marriage and 10 years, I'm not sure how much you guys, I'm sure you can relate to some aspects of it, but and I don't know how old you are, but when the wrinkles set in and the body doesn't look quite like what it used to, and all of that stuff that just becomes a part of it. I mean, the question is then how can you, first of all, let go of that attraction to the pretty flower, to the youth, and to all of that. Like you're saying, that our culture programs us to. I'm not sure it's just our culture. I think our culture is also a reflection of something innate in us. There's probably some evolutionary biology in this as well, that what we're attracted to. But even so how do we come to terms with accepting aging and accepting the aging of our relationships, accepting the aging of ourselves physically, accepting all of that comes with just the years?
Yeah. One of the things I've found, because I was a college athlete and you perform at a certain level and that changes, but is not focusing on the thing that I might be upset about, and that's with me. But if I'm doing that with my partner as well, but if it's like, I can't run the mile as fast as I used to, I could sit there and try to run that mile as fast as I used to, or focus on the fact that I can't, or it can be an appearance thing. I got bags under my eyes now when I wake up. And instead of, there's a saying like the object of attention breeds basically more attention. Like the more you pay attention to it, the more important it seems. So I don't know. I'm just trying to share something that I've found has been valuable in relation to that. In a long-term relationship, it'd be easy to focus on your partner and the fact that they don't look like they used to. And you could focus on it, or you can pick something positive. And that positive reinforcement would be a better loop to put yourself in.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm curious. I wanted to ask you, Sarah, because I know women have got their own very particular version of this, especially when it comes to physical attributes. And I talk to women my age now and ask them what it's like for them to be invisible. And some of them say it's wonderful. It's really nice not to be looked at as some kind of prey. And some of them say it's awful to suddenly become invisible. And I just wonder what your perspective on this is.
Well, I'm only 33, so I feel like I have a younger body. I will say that I have given birth. I have a daughter. We have a daughter, Stella. And my body at 20 compared to 33 is completely different. And, I don't like the way my breasts look as like I used to. And I have definitely a different body image as what I once had. But I will say that I feel almost more confident in my body now than I did when I was 20. And so I can't really compare it to, women who are, like you said, maybe in their 50s who are at a different phase of their life. But I feel more confident, and I like my body more than I did for other reasons, I guess you could say. More of like, I'm proud that my body has gone through this amazing transition and the ability to produce a child. I don't know. That has something to do with it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have this pet theory. I have no idea, of course, if it has any real reality, but there's something that a woman doesn't become fully embodied until she gives birth. Mm-hmm. There's something in that process of really putting her into her body in a way that you just can't do in the abstract. And I wonder if that's a little bit of what you're describing.
Yeah, I think so. I think there is an element of being able to really be in touch with your body, like you mentioned, and being aware of a lot of these things. I think I have grown over the last 13 years. Well, my whole life, really. But in this time period that we're talking about, that has allowed me to really appreciate my body and everything.
Well, let me ask you too, since, I had this conversation when this article came out in Psychology Today on the fatigue of long-term relationships. And my children are your age, more or less, and they're all married. And it actually seemed, I was kind of surprised, it was threatening to them that I was writing this. Not so much that they were worried about their parents' marriage, but that they wanted to think that as they got older, they would be the exception to this rule. They couldn't believe that, they just kept thinking, well, if marriage, when it gets, 30, 40 years in, if it's tired, it's because the people haven't done what they needed to do, or they had some kind of notion that they can avoid this. And they were threatened by it. So I guess I'm wondering, if you're 33, and I don't know, Chase, how old you are, what does it sound like to you when I tell you, well, you're 10 years in, let's talk again when you're 30 or 40 years in, and I hope you will be, what it's like for you.
I think that was a natural reaction from your kids. And I think that might be a lot of people's is like, oh, not us. Like, we're not going to get older, or, like that's, I think, one of the, maybe the benefits of youth, but also not, is that, yeah, you're in your own little world, and that does start to change. But I think even as you get into your midlife, 50s, 60s, you don't feel like a 50-year-old. I don't feel like a 33. I'm 33. You don't, in my head, I'm still like 20. And in some ways that's good, but in some ways I think what you're hinting at is a bit idealistic. And Sarah and I don't think we had crazy, unreal expectations, but it's certainly, we've had, struggles in our relationship, and 10 years in was a lot different than even 5 years in. And so 20 years is going to be a lot different too. And I think the key are the things that, we're talking about here, and checking your expectations, and some of the other things we'll go over, but really doing the work. I think it doesn't just happen. Is that kind of your experience?
Before we continue on, we're going to take a short break to tell you about our sponsors.
Today's episode is brought to you by Plan to Eat.
So I am a big fan of planning out my meals in advance for the week and only having to go to the grocery store once.
I have like a weird thing about going to the grocery store more than once a week.
You do, and I think it's rubbed off on me. So I'm in the same boat. But I am horrible about organizing recipes and creating lists for the grocery store. I always end up forgetting like the crucial ingredient for whatever recipe I'm trying to make. And so we end up making like boring salads with grilled chicken. So no fun.
They're all right sometimes.
It's okay. But for me, it's super important that Stella is introduced to a variety of flavors and foods, which means we need to start cooking a lot more. And Plan to Eat makes it a whole lot easier to do that.
Plan to Eat was born from their desire to eat real and delicious food prepared at home. Plan to Eat is a tool to help you prepare delicious, wholesome food that nourishes both body and soul.
So here is how it works. And I just gave Chase the whole demonstration, and he is cool. Super stoked. So Plan to Eat is a subscription service that gives you the tools to clip and organize recipes from any website. I just showed him how I clipped from like multiple websites. Create a meal plan, and then their software automatically creates and organizes a shopping list based on your plan. And like I just mentioned, I just added my favorite Kenyan braised beef recipe, which is so good. And I literally copy and pasted the URL, and it turned it into a perfect grocery list. And it was super pretty because it's formatted like by each area in the grocery store of what you need to get. And so I am super stoked to use it.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, just like the technology or whatever is going on with the algorithm.
I just don't even know what that is. It's amazing.
How it does that. And with your subscription, you can access your meal plans and shopping lists on your desktop and their mobile app. And they have a full-time support team to help you get started and answer any questions that you may have. Plan to Eat offers monthly and yearly options for $4.95 a month or $39 a year. That's only 75 cents a week.
Whoa.
Less than $1.
Less than $1, people.
If you didn't know what 75 cents was. And they also include a free, fully functional 30-day trial with no payment required, so you can easily see if it's right for you.
Plan to Eat only has one big sale per year, but if you visit plantoeat.com/IDO, you can start a 60-day trial instead of their normal 30-day trial.
For free.
for free. So check it out. We know it will make your life a lot easier like it has for mine. So visit plantoeat.com/I-do to start your free 60-day trial. Today's episode is also brought to you by Atlantis. Did you recently get engaged and are now dreaming of a Bahamas destination wedding? With more than 15 unique wedding and reception venues, from an elegant ballroom reception to an oceanside gathering under the stars, it's so easy to imagine your dream wedding coming to life at Atlantis. Chase and I are even considering flying down to Atlantis to renew our vows because the lush tropical setting is just amazing. It's so beautiful. Atlantis offers 7 different packages to choose from, starting with just the basics to full production of the wedding, and each couple has their own dedicated wedding and event specialist that is on site and helps the couples customize their special day preferences. Atlantis's unique ocean theme resort offers a variety of accommodation choices, from the relaxed tropical ambience of the beach and coral hotels, the iconic Royal, the contemporary comfort of the Reef, to the sheer luxury of the all-suites style at the Cove. And from the little kids all the way up to the grandparents, there's something to do on the property for the whole family. There's a casino, adventure water park, spa, where the bride and her wedding party can indulge in a variety of relaxing pre-wedding treatments, an 18-hole golf course for the guys to escape and play around, marine life experiences, fitness center, movie theater, 21 restaurants, and so much more. And traveling to Atlantis for you and your guests is a breeze. There are daily nonstop flights from most major U.S. cities. Check out atlantisbahamas.com to learn more, and make sure to mention I Do Podcast to receive the best room rates and up to 10% off your wedding package. Again, that's atlantisbahamas.com, and mention I Do Podcast to receive 10% off your wedding package.
Oh, I mean, that's one of the points I put in that article is anybody who tells you you can just kind of coast once you get married is lying. It's just not true. You have to continually work at it. My wife and I work, I don't know if you're familiar with, it's called imago therapy. It's a kind of couples therapy, and that's the kind of couples therapy I do as a psychologist, but there's this dialogue process where you sit down and across from each other and mirror each other. And we do that every single week. We've been doing it for the past 15, 16 years now. It requires work, and there's just no getting around it. Just before we leave the point we were talking about just now about the youth, one of the things when like my son was saying, well, that's not the case. And my daughter-in-law said, that doesn't have to be the case. I said, name me an exception. Name me an exception of an older couple that's still fresh and just like youth and all of that. And they couldn't. They couldn't. And I was going to say, even my own marriage, which, again, it's a good marriage. We work at it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It does not look like stuff in the movies. It's just not that way anymore. Sometimes we're like that couple I described in the airport when we started our conversation. That's us sometimes. That's the reality.
I also think, too, that when you are in a newer, fresh relationship or you're younger, it's easy to take the approach of almost like the ignorance is bliss. Like you're not really focused on all this work that you will inevitably have to do in the future. And so until that point, you just kind of go along with everything is great, and until it's not. And then reality hits. And so I do think that, that's an understandable reaction that your kids had regarding the article. Right.
Yeah. I work with a lot of couples in your cohort, the 30-somethings, where the kids come and they're just, it's like you just got hit by a freight train when you have kids. I tell people, you can hide your crazy until you have your first child, and then all your stuff comes out. You can look really good until then. But as from my perspective now, several decades removed from that stage, I just have nothing but compassion for what 30-somethings in marriage with young kids are going through. It's so hard. You have no idea how hard it is. I had my youngest and his wife came to live with us when they moved And they had a 6-week-old and a 3-year-old. And I thought I remembered what it was like to have small children. I had no idea. I had totally forgotten. I guess I've heard this about childbirth, that, you blissfully forget from childbirth to childbirth what it was really like.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazingly hard. And so my heart goes out and my hat goes off to all you 30-somethings out there who are in the middle of it's an exciting phase, but it's so intense. Just anyhow, that's my little soapbox on that.
I really want to dive into these tips that you gave, and I love this conversation, and we're hitting some important points, but I want to make sure we have time to go over some of the others, and maybe we can slip right back in. We kind of talked about it a little, but that there's no easy way to stay connected and stay growing, and it requires conscious and sustained effort, like we've been harping on.
Yep. Yeah, and people do that in different ways. I described the way my wife and I do it. I know lots of people do date nights, but you just cannot go on automatic pilot. You cannot slip into taking each other for granted. It's just the beginning of the end if you do. You have to constantly work at staying awake, at staying alive, at staying real with each other. And it's easy. I mean, the paradox, of course, is the longer you're married, the easier it is to slip into automatic pilot because you are secure. He or she is not going to leave me. But that's the beginning of the end in terms of aliveness. For it to be alive, it has to be real. And
that's an important
That's what I'd say about that.
One of the other points you talked about is to seek out other friendships rather than load all the needs onto your partner. And we've had shows where we've focused on this specifically, and it's super valuable. But I think it's so important that we should just talk about it right now too. And being that you have been married for, you said 38 years, I would love to hear your opinion on how you dealt with this in your marriage.
Well, it's a challenge because it's very easy for one or the other to feel threatened by these connections, even if they're not sexual. First of all, let me start by thinking I don't think it's realistic to expect your marriage partner to be everything. And I think there's somebody who wrote a book, I don't remember when it came out, the All or Nothing Marriage or something. At any rate, I heard this discussion about how over time, and this is a more recent development, we've come to expect our marriages to be best friend, passionate lover, business partner, travel. I mean, it's supposed to fulfill everything, and that's just not realistic to do that. So I think it is necessary to let there be space for other people to fill some needs and not to feel threatened when that does. And one other point, I didn't make this in the article I wrote, but this is another one of my pet theories that I can't empirically prove yet. I think that one of the pairings in couples is there's somebody who's more naturally monogamous and somebody who's more naturally a seeker. So that you will see these couples where one person is constantly looking outside the marriage for external something. And I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about affairs. I mean, that can be, of course, too, but I'm talking more about just has more of a need for these outside stimulations or stimuli. And then there's the partner who's the more naturally monogamous, let's call it, is feeling, well, what, aren't I enough for you? Or isn't this enough? So just being alert to that also in your marriage, who's taking on that role. It's easy, of course, to say, well, the person who's more naturally the seeker is the one causing all the disruption and is the problem. Why aren't they more satisfied? I think that's an oversimplification. I think we tend to take on roles in our marriage. So like in my own marriage, I'm the more natural seeker. And so I'm the one who stirs the pot all the time. And my wife is the one who provides the stability. And we can, I can feel guilty about that. Why am I constantly seeking? But I can also, and I do believe this, that I provide a lot of the lifeblood by doing that, just like she provides a lot of the stability. So I just wanted to bring that point in, that I do think we should be aware of that potential in marriages, that one person will more naturally lean in one direction and one person will more naturally lean in the other.
Yeah, as you were saying that, Chase and I are kind of nodding our heads because that's the same dynamic that we have in our relationship. And it's so true that luckily Chase is like that, because I feel like he is the one that continues to bring the growth into our relationship, which is so important. And I value that so much. And
Sarah brings the stability, or else we'd just be all over the place.
Right. Yeah. And I would say, of course, if we're going to be honest, that Sarah, you're probably going to say, I value that so much and I'm also threatened by it. And Chase will say, I value your stability, but sometimes I feel limited by it. I mean, I think we have to acknowledge that both of those things are going to be true.
Yes.
We like it and we don't like it.
Yep.
It's so spot on. Yeah. Acknowledging it is important in half the battle. So thank you for that. And I want to read this one directly from your article because I love the way you wrote it. And that is to let go of criticism. And you say, you don't need to say 99% of the critical things you want to say to your partner. You've already said them at one time or another, and they will do nothing to make your marriage better, even if you're 100% right. So I love that. It's like, you've already said it. There's no point in, you've been together for, even if it's 3 or 5 years, like, you don't need to harp on it.
Yeah. Have you ever successfully trained somebody through their criticism? I mean, the answer is always no. So why do you keep at it? Why try? And what I do find when I work with couples, that something as simple as this, which is on the one hand common sense, but when you just say it as baldly and as, hit them over the, just stop it. It does no good. It never will do any good. Don't do it. We need these kind of basic zip your lip admonitions because, when the moment comes when you're just dying to say that thing that you're so sure you're right, you need something really concrete, basic, and, clear. Don't do it. And yeah, it saves me a lot. Not all the time, unfortunately, but most of the time. Just shut up, Josh. You don't need to say what you want to say.
And along those same lines, you also mentioned that honesty is so important, and say what you mean, but don't say it meanly or mean. Right. Which is so important.
Yeah, that's, I heard that from somebody. I think that's not my line. Say what you mean, don't say it mean. I think that's from the 12-step programs. And they are I love 12-step programs for all the pithy sayings they come up with. And I think that's one of theirs. Yeah, it's zipping your lip from criticism is not to say, don't speak up when something hurts or something's bothering you. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you do need to say that, but you need to say it in a clean way, not a critical way. So yeah, I just like that saying. Say what you mean, don't say it mean.
So for somebody who is listening and maybe they can relate to being a little bit more on the critical side, obviously awareness to this issue is the first step, but are there any tools that somebody could use to kind of snap out of that critical mode or that urge to want to always snap back or snap at your partner?
It's going to sound somewhat like a cliche, but my experience bears this out. Usually the most critical people of others are, if you dive down, they're more critical of themselves than they are of anybody else. They're constantly criticizing themselves, telling themselves they're not enough this, they're not enough that, and then it's just very natural for them to extend that outwards into other people. I mean, that's their mind is almost like programmed along those grooves, So I guess I would say, ask, are you being compassionate enough with yourself? Are you cutting yourself enough slack? Are you being kind enough to yourself? I think that is what I would say to somebody who's really got that critical thing going. Just to learn to be more compassionate with themselves, and I think that will help them be more compassionate with others.
One of the other things you talk about is to take advantage of what you have in a long-term partnership that you can never get in a new relationship. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, you two have been, I say this to couples, I'm sure it's true for you. If God forbid something would have happened to either one of you, you'd probably remarry or whatever, but no one could ever take the place of who you are for each other. You're already intertwined after 10 years in such a meaningful way, all the different holidays and birthdays and, even the fights, everything, there's a connection there that is not easily replaced. The serial monogamists who do this every 6 months or every year, they never get the same kind of depth and richness and pain and joy and all of that comes from what you two have co-created in your 10 years together. And it sounds like you've got one child. So is to really appreciate that the person you're with is irreplaceable. Nobody can step into those shoes and fill out all that's just because you've grown together. And so it's a big deal. And as the longer it gets, the more that's true, that you're at this point, I'm with my wife longer than I was single by far. And it's just, I don't even want to contemplate what it would be like without her.
And one of the other things you talk about is to think about how you've grown, hopefully, into a more secure lifestyle as a part of being in this long-term relationship.
Right. And I think what I also said in there is not to use that, the more years you are together, hopefully the more secure you become with each other, but you don't want to use that to coast. You want to use that to continue to take chances, to continue to grow, that you can do things with that security that you can't do when you're still in that hunting phase, when the excitement's nice and exciting, but it doesn't give you the security to really take some big risks personally, for example, that you want to do something, put yourself out in the world in some new way, or I don't know, or if it's a business thing, it sounds like you two together doing what you're doing with these podcasts is a really lovely example of risk-taking and growth and development that you're able to do together based on the security of your relationship.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an exercise that I've done where I'm like, if Sarah and I hadn't been together for this long, I would probably be like a beach bum somewhere. and not that that's the worst thing in the world, because I don't try to be super negative, but I'm like, play that thought exercise and do it in an honest way. And I might be a beach bum and just struggling to get by. Instead, I'm a beach bum and we have a podcast and I have a place to sleep at night.
Yeah. And I'm going to say something that I know is probably, I don't know if it's politically incorrect, but it's not. By and large, most people do better off being partnered with somebody. I think it's very easy to be cool and groovy or a cool, groovy beach bum when you're all single and everything. The rubber meets the road when you have to live with somebody. And that forces a development that cannot happen single. So I think by and large, people become much wholer, much more rich and developed and interesting and full by being partnered than by being single.
We agree.
We agree. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of relationships that we talked about, long and short term even, but they're a mirror to grow. Because if I'm just on the beach by myself, I have no one to communicate with. And even if I have, short relationships here and there, I'm not really seeing like, oh, that thing that I do, that's not productive. I'm not communicating well. I'm not, being empathetic. And that's really where we can grow. And so I think it's important to take that perspective. I know it's helped me because it's not always easy. There's times where you're like, you play that game of thinking like, well, what if, we had done this differently or we weren't together for so long. And it's easy to kind of go down that path. And instead of asking yourself the questions and playing the thought exercises that we've gone over here today.
Right. And it's hard. That's the thing. I think maybe that's kind of the way to sum this up. Like youth there's something easy about it. It's easy to be hot. It's easy to be good looking. It's easy. All those things are easy. It's hard to do the work that you have to do, but that's where the value comes in. All these struggles that you're describing that, you and Sarah, like all other couples go through. Yeah. It's hard, but that's where the growth comes from. It's from the difficulty.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for sharing these tips and some of your personal experiences from being married for 38 years.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. And why don't we wrap up by having you tell our listeners where they can find you online, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay. Online, it's just my name, www.joshgressel, JOSHGRES as in Sam, SEL.com.
Wonderful. We'll have the link to your website as well as the article you wrote on the podcast description and on our website at idpodcast.com. And I know we went over a majority of the list that you created, so we encourage our listeners to check out the article to see all of them. And thank you again for joining us on the show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Hi guys, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. As always, all the links are in the show notes page as well as on the podcast description. And while you're on our website, we encourage you guys to check out our 14-day Happy Couple Challenge. We send you an email for 14 days with simple, doable challenges to help strengthen and improve your relationship. And on our website, we also have a bunch of free resources for your relationship. So we encourage you to check those out. We also have our Love Tribe on Facebook. We encourage you guys to join the tribe and be there for support for each other. If you have questions or just need some relationship advice, we are all here for each other. The group has grown to almost 1,000 people, and we love it. So we hope you guys join that. You can go to Facebook, Love Tribe Fam, and you'll find us right there. And if you are interested in learning more about our flagship course, Spark My Relationship, we hope you guys check it out. We have a special offer that is only for podcast listeners. So you can go to sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock, and you can unlock that special offer and learn more. As always, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next week.